Hello and welcome to today's webinar from Scribe Software. I'm Paul Varley, Product Marketing Manager at Scribe, and the subject of today's webinar is when to use iPaaS. We'll be looking at 5 different common approaches to data integration, comparing and contrasting them a little bit, and then looking specifically at the end at the integration platform as a service, which is of course cloud data integration. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping rules. Some of this is just based on the way the presentation platform works. All of your lines are muted, so you won't be able to talk back to me. If you have questions, there is a Q&A link at the bottom, so please do submit your questions through that, and we'll come to those at the end. The presentation is going to be about 20 to 25 minutes today. I want to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. And with that, let's get started. First, let's look at some research that a company called Okta did in mid-2015, so about 18 months ago. Okta is a cloud authentication company, and they did some research that they published on the statistics of the number of cloud applications that businesses of different sizes are using. And this is really a worldwide study. There's a link to it at the bottom if you're interested in taking a look there. But what they found is that on average, the median number of authenticated cloud applications in use really for businesses of all different sizes is about 16. And that number really surprised me that would be that high number of applications in use in most companies. And really that's not even including any in-house applications that people have. So I think that just speaks to the importance of data integration, because so many companies have their data, whether it's financial information, customer data, marketing data, spread out through so many different systems that to make business work effectively today and to be effective, they need to be able to get that data back and forth between those various different systems. And so with that, there are a number of different ways of tackling that. And here we've got 5 of the most common approaches to data integration that people have really tried over the years. And so we're going to look at each of these in turn. So export and import, extract, transform, and load, point-to-point, enterprise application integration, and then finally iPaaS. So let's start with export and import. This is the one, if you're familiar with any of the 5, this is probably the one that you've used at some point in your business career. And I like to quote a guy named Rob Colley from Power Pivot Pro, say that 3 times fast. He likes to say that the 3rd most common button in data and business intelligence applications is export to Excel. And that's only after OK and cancel. So the export and import method is really just that. It's a manual process by which you go to one application, you select the data that you want to move, you export it to a file, and then in many cases the format of the outbound file or the file that you save is not necessarily the same format that you need in the other target system. So oftentimes what this means is that you're going to need to open the file in a tool like Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or whatever software you have there, open that file up, and then make any changes that are necessary. So for example, if your source data is formatted as people have separate columns for first name and last name, but the target system has only a single field where those are combined, you might have to open it up in Excel, create a formula, create a new column that concatenates or combines those 2 fields together into one, and then delete the other 2 columns, save it again, and then go to the target application, find the area where you do the import, and then use the corresponding import from file to get your data in. And this works fine for processes that you don't do very often. So say, for example, that you go to a trade show once a year and you meet with people and you use a lead tracking system that creates a comma separated values file. That might be perfectly fine to import that file into your customer relationship management software once a year. But it's a manual process. So if you're trying to do something that happens frequently, or you have large volumes of data or possibilities of errors and things like that, it's not a great approach, right? Because you're using manual effort when something could be automated. And really the other 4 approaches that we're talking about today deal with ways or different approaches of automating what can be a much more complex process of integrating data between applications. The next one we'll look at is extract, transform, and load, what's commonly known as ETL software. And this is usually on-premise software that's installed. The most common use case for this is in building a data warehouse. So again, if you think about those 16 plus different applications that a company might be using to manage their data, if they want a single picture of that data, then they're going to want to put that into a database, a data warehouse, that they can use a data analytics tool to figure out what's going on. And this is where ETL software is most commonly used. And so it has connectors to those various different things, databases, CRM systems, financial systems, cloud applications. So it can draw your data out of those 16 plus different systems. That's the extract part. Transformation is really what I was talking about on the last slide, only in an automated fashion, where you create formulas that apply to the various different fields in your source data, and that data is then changed or transformed as it's pushed into the target, which in this case, in the example, is a database or data warehouse. And ETL software can handle very large data volumes. It's usually scheduled as a batch process, so something might run once a day, once an hour, depending on how often you need to refresh the data. Usually it has the capability of understanding what is new or changed, so it's not necessarily going to get a full copy of the data every time, because that's inefficient. And so it'll look at timestamps on your data to know what is new or changed, and then only bring those changed things down and then merge it in. It also usually has the ability to bring multiple streams together. So if you have your data spread across different systems, you can merge those records together before putting it in the target system. So that's the ETL approach. The next approach we'll talk about is probably the one that has been around the longest, and that is point-to-point integration between systems. And this is where an IT department will actually write software to link your different applications together. And 25 years ago, this was a very common approach, because businesses had a very small number of business applications that they use, and maybe there was a finance system and an HR system and one or two other things. So it was feasible to actually build connections between each of those and maintain it on an ongoing basis. Historically, applications weren't updated that often either. You know, if you had a finance system 25 years ago, chances are you only upgraded it every 4 or 5 years. And so those integrations would be in place for a relatively long period of time, and there weren't a whole lot of them. Now, with point-to-point integration, the advantage is that because it's custom software, you can make it do almost anything given enough time and resources. But it does tend to be expensive, both in terms of resources consumed and time, again, because you're building custom software. And I think the biggest issue with point-to-point integration today, and the reason that so many people are really moving away from this approach now, is that the number of applications that you have has a big effect or a big impact on the number of connections you need to build. So in the drawing that you see, if you have 5 applications and you need a bidirectional connection between each pair, you're going to end up with 10 connections there. If you increase the number of applications from 5 to 10, you're actually going to need 45 bidirectional connections between those 10 applications. So you see that the number of connections increases dramatically as you add just one more application to the mix. And when you think about the 16 plus applications in the Okta report, the complexity here starts to get pretty extreme, and very few IT departments are really going to want to go to this level of effort. Not only that, the pace of new versions of software coming out today is much different than it was historically. Especially for cloud applications, it's not unusual for them to have multiple releases per year. If you're familiar with Salesforce.com, you know that they have 3 releases every year, very regularly. And so from a testing perspective, you can get into an endless cycle of testing these integrations as new versions are constantly coming out. So this is a well-recognized problem and weakness of point-to-point integration, and so the next approach is really the industry or the integration industry's answer to that problem, which is instead of building a link between every pair, or really even every pair that needs to talk to each other, you put an extra application in the middle, an integration application, that sole job is to only shuttle messages back and forth between the various different applications that you have. So this is referred to as enterprise application integration. You've got this integration app that sits in the middle and manages messages back and forth. It can also handle situations where one application is down for some point. It usually has a queuing mechanism in it that will persist those messages until the receiving end is back up and running. It does error handling and so forth. But the main advantage of enterprise application integration over point-to-point is that it dramatically reduces the number of connections required, especially where you've got lots of applications, because as you can see in the diagram, there's only one connection between each application and the integration app. It's really a hub and spoke model in that sense. So with 5 applications, you need 5 connections. If you go to 10 applications, you need just 10 connections. And then if you go to 16 or 30 or whatever the number is, it's just a linear increase. You'd only need 16 for 16 applications. So it scales much better there in terms of the number of applications that you're using. And so this is why over the past 10 to 15 years, a lot of IT companies or IT organizations within companies have adopted this approach over point-to-point. And in terms of the products that are available out in the industry, the most common category that falls under this umbrella today is what's called the enterprise service bus. And so that would be considered a form of enterprise application integration. I feel like there's one other thing that I wanted to say about this, but it escapes me. Oh no, it's right there on the slide. So the other thing to note about enterprise application integration is that you're not avoiding software development here. You're avoiding some of it, certainly, but you still have to write some code to connect each of your applications into the integration app in the middle. So in that sense, you still have to have software engineers available. You still have to have QA engineers to test those connections. And again, whenever new versions of your endpoints come out, you're going to be going through perhaps some development work, right? Because when, let's say, when Salesforce changes its API, there's always a chance that something's going to break. And if something breaks, then you have to use your engineering resource to fix that in your integration, and then do, like I said, testing and verification. So in practice, usually you're going to have separate development and production environments, and there is going to be software development involved in this approach, just like in the point-to-point approach. Okay, so on to the fifth approach, and really this is probably the one that's most of interest to those of you on the call today, integration platform as a service. And this is, of the 5, really the newest approach, and like really every category of software out there, integration software is also moving to the cloud. And so an iPaaS is really just a cloud-based multi-tenant integration platform that you can buy as a service. Instead of buying software license and installing it on a server, you sign up for a cloud service and you rent software in the cloud just like you would for a CRM system or a marketing automation system or anything else that you can buy as a service. A common misconception about iPaaS is that it's only for cloud-to-cloud integration. As a rule, that's not the case. Most iPaaS products or platforms have the capability to do integration with on-premise systems and databases as well. And as you can see in the diagram, the common approach to doing that is to have your iPaaS in the cloud, but then also have an agent, which is a small piece of software that you install on a machine behind a corporate firewall that gives the iPaaS access to the systems that are within your corporate network. And that works both for cloud to on-premise integration as well as on-premise to premise. So you can even do, say, integration between a database and an on-premise financial system with an iPaaS and never have your data go up to the cloud. We talked to lots of people who have concerns about their data security and not seeing any of their data up into a cloud system. And with an iPaaS, you're able to do that because you can configure the agent to only handle data inside the firewall and not even send any copies of it up to the cloud, only send telemetry type data about what was processed and when and stuff like that up to the cloud, because you do want to see that in your cloud interface. So with an iPaaS, you have the separation between your design and monitoring environment, which is in the cloud. Usually there's a web interface with a design tool that you use to create your integration maps, schedule things, and look at history of integration jobs that have run. That's all usually through a cloud interface, but the actual work is distributed to an agent. That agent may also be in the cloud as well. If you're just integrating to cloud-based applications like, let's say, Salesforce and Marketo, you can use a cloud agent there and not have to install anything locally, but you also have the ability to install something in your own network if you want to do that. The agent model also provides a natural mechanism for distributed processing. So it allows the iPaaS to scale easily to handle really any amount of integration jobs. You simply have to add agents, again, whether in the cloud or on-premise. And then some other things that some iPaaSes can do are, some of them give you the ability to build your own connector. So they may have an interface. Let's say you're dealing with a custom application that you've built, and you just want to build a connector to talk to it. Most iPaaSes have that capability. And then as a cloud platform, they often also have an API that allows you to do all the control and monitoring functions. So if you're using a system monitoring tool internally, you can hook that up to the API in the iPaaS, monitor your jobs, and get notifications on when there's something that you need to attend to. So really that's the main. The other thing that's a main difference certainly between iPaaS and either enterprise application integration or point-to-point is really the nature of the user who's involved. Typically, you don't need to be a software engineer to drive these products. They're really aimed at business analysts, people who understand the systems that they're integrating and have perhaps beyond just an end user's understanding of the applications. So they need to understand a little bit about the data model behind things and how fields work and so forth. But they don't typically need coding skills to design maps for this. And then to kind of wrap things up, I think I'll just go ahead and try to answer the question that we posed at the beginning. So now that you've had an introduction to the 5 different common approaches to data integration, the question is, when would you want to use an iPaaS? And really, the answer to that is, first of all, as I was just saying, if you're not a developer, then this is a great fit for you because you don't have to either put your request into a queue and wait for development resources to be available. You can really get right in there and do your own work if you're, like I was saying, if you're a business analyst. And so it can be very effective there. I will say that it doesn't mean that you shouldn't use an iPaaS if you are a developer. Certainly we have lots of developers that we talk to that that just love the ease of use and love the speed with which they can get integrations in place with an iPaaS, but it is very accessible to business analysts. The second sort of litmus test that you would look at is when you have 3 or more systems to integrate. Again, going back to that Okta study at the beginning, if you've got lots of systems and you need to move data between them, this is where the iPaaS is really going to shine because most of them come with out-of-the-box connectivity to most of the common business systems out there. You're going to be able to quickly connect to them and get your integrations in place. A third time when you really want to strongly consider using an iPaaS is if you prefer cloud applications. So if your company has an initiative where you're already trying to move things off of servers in your corporate network into the cloud, let's say you're doing that with CRM and you're doing that with ERP, you're doing that with marketing, you don't necessarily want to buy an integration platform that you're going to have to install on-premise. It'd be better if you could have that in the cloud, and the iPaaS allows you to do that. And the fourth thing that you should consider is really your time frame. iPaaS is great when you've got a short time frame to work with and you need to get something in place quickly. It's really going to help you do that, so it's going to be very helpful there. And then I'd just say, if you want to learn some more, we do have a white paper on this subject as well. It's called When to Use iPaaS, so that should be easy to remember. And when we send out the email following up on this webinar, we'll make sure to include a link where you can download that white paper and take a look at that if this webinar has really piqued your interest. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left in the schedule, so I'm going to turn to questions now. If you have a question, I'd ask that you would just go ahead and type it into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and then I'd be happy to answer any of those. Okay, the first question, and I didn't think to address this, but does Scribe offer an iPaaS? Well, as you might guess, we do. We do have an iPaaS called Scribe Online, which is our cloud data integration product. It's been out for about 5 years, and I'd encourage you to go ahead and take a look at that on our website. There's plenty of information. We do offer a free trial as well if that's of interest to you. Other questions? Go ahead and type them in, and I'll see if I can get an answer for you. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any additional questions, so I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. And if there are no further questions, you'll get 5 extra minutes back on this webinar today. I don't see any, so I will thank you for attending, and we'll see you on the next webinar.